All right, so we're diving into a chapter you sent us all about uh, breaking bad habits and forming good ones. I
Yeah.
know it. I know it sounds kind of like self-helpy,
Right.
but trust me, this is way more interesting than it might sound at first,
Yeah.
especially if you're like me and you're trying to make some changes.
It's definitely something we all struggle with.
Yeah, get at
So
it.
this is really about understanding the mechanics of how our brains work and how we can kind of work with them, not against them.
Exactly. And this chapter does such a good job of that lays out this framework called the 4 laws of behavior change, which I know it sounds a little formal, but it's actually pretty intuitive once you get into it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It really boils down to this. To build good habits,
Yeah.
you want to make them obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. And then to break bad habits, you kind of do the opposite.
Okay.
You make them invisible, unattractive, difficult, and unsatisfying.
Oh, that makes sense. I mean, it sounds pretty straightforward, but how do we actually do that?
Right. So that's where the tactics come in, right? So it's not just about understanding the principles, but it's about how to actually apply this in your life.
Yeah.
So for example, to make a good habit, like obvious, you might use visual cues, like putting your running shoes by the door if you're trying to go for a run in the morning.
Oh, so you're removing those barriers to action,
Exactly.
like just so you don't even have to think about it.
Exactly. And to make a bad habit invisible, you might do the opposite.
Yeah.
So let's say you're trying to reduce your social media use.
Right.
You could delete those apps from your phone. You could log out of your accounts, make it more effort to access them.
So it's manipulating your environment to make the good choices, the easy choices, and the bad choices harder.
Exactly.
I like that. Okay, so making those good choices easier.
And then let's talk about making habits attractive.
Okay.
So the chapter dives into this idea of temptation bundling, which I think is brilliant.
Okay.
It's basically pairing something you want to do with something you need to do.
I'm intrigued. Give me an example.
Okay, so let's say you love watching your favorite show, but you're trying to get in the habit of cooking more meals at home.
Right.
You could only allow yourself to watch that show while you're prepping dinner, so suddenly cooking becomes a lot more appealing.
So you're like hacking your reward system.
Exactly. And then there's the flip side,
Okay.
making bad habits unattractive.
Right.
One technique the chapter talks about is habit contracts, which honestly sounded kind of intense to me at first, but
So contracts like legally binding documents.
well, not necessarily.
Okay.
It's more about creating a clear agreement with yourself and often involving someone else for accountability where you outline the consequences of slipping up.
Okay, so there's skin in the game.
Yeah.
Are there any examples of this in the real world from the chapter?
Yeah, it talks about this entrepreneur named Brian Harris who used a habit contract to lose weight. And he basically set these increasingly embarrassing consequences for himself if he didn't hit his weekly goals, like having to wear ridiculous outfits in public or donate money to a rival sports team.
Ouch, that's hitting him where it hurts. I can see how that would be motivating.
Yeah.
It seems like you'd need a pretty high tolerance for embarrassment to pull that off, though.
That's true. But the underlying principle is what's important. It's about making the cost of your bad habits real and immediate.
Right, not some abstract future consequence.
Exactly.
Okay, and that brings us to the 3rd law, making good habits easy and bad habits difficult.
Yeah.
This seems pretty straightforward.
It is in theory, but the chapter gives some great tips on how to reduce friction for good habits.
Okay.
Like prepping your workout clothes the night before, keeping healthy snacks readily available.
Also, just setting yourself up for success.
Exactly. And on the flip side, to make bad habits difficult, you might increase the number of steps involved.
Okay.
Let's say you're trying to reduce your online shopping.
Yeah.
Instead of saving your credit card info on websites, make yourself manually enter it each time.
That's a really good idea.
That extra step might just be enough to reconsider that impulse purchase.
Yeah, I do that all the time. And then there's the final law, making good habits satisfying and bad habits unsatisfying. And this is where the idea of inverting the 4th law comes in, right?
Precisely.
So instead of focusing on, rewarding yourself for good habits, which is important,
Right.
it flips the script and says, how can we make those bad habits really unpleasant?
Yeah, think about it this way. If you're trying to cut back on sugary drinks, you might create a visual reminder of the negative consequences, like a picture of tooth decay or weight gain, and place it right next to your fridge.
Ooh, that's a bit morbid, but I bet it's effective.
It is.
So you're associating it with something unpleasant.
Exactly. Or you could create a system where every time you slip up, you have to do something you really dislike, like cleaning the bathroom or doing a chore you've been putting off.
So it's like a self-imposed punishment system.
Exactly.
I could see how that would deter those unwanted behaviors.
It can be quite effective, but again, the key is to tailor it to your own personality and your own preferences.
This is also fascinating. It really is about understanding the psychology behind our habits
Huh?
and then using that knowledge to our advantage.
It is, and the chapter goes even deeper, exploring concepts like habit stacking, identity-based habits, and the importance of tracking your progress.
Well, I'm definitely hooked.
Yeah,
Looks like we have a lot more ground to cover.
we do, and trust me, it gets more interesting from here.
I can't wait.
We'll uncover even more practical strategies and insights that you can start applying to your own life today.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
It's fascinating how much of this just comes down to understanding ourselves,
Yeah.
not just on a surface level, but really like diving deep into what motivates us, what drives our behavior.
Totally. And I feel like we've been operating on autopilot for so long,
Yeah.
and we just go through the motions without really examining why we do the things we do.
Exactly. And that's where this concept of identity-based habits comes in which the chapter talks about. And it's this powerful shift in perspective. Instead of focusing on specific outcomes like losing weight or making more money, it encourages us to think about the kind of person we want to be.
Okay, so how does that translate into changing our habits?
Well, let's say you want to become a healthier person.
Right.
Instead of just focusing on eating salads and hitting the gym, you start seeing yourself as a healthy person, someone who makes choices that support their well-being.
So it's like aligning your actions with your desired identity.
Exactly.
It's almost like you're playing a role,
Yeah.
but eventually that role becomes who you are.
Exactly. Your habits become an expression of your self-image. And the chapter argues that when our habits are rooted in our identity, they're much more likely to stick.
That makes sense. It's
Okay.
not just about willpower anymore. It's about becoming the kind of person who naturally does those things.
Right. And this ties into another important concept from the chapter, the idea of focusing on systems, not goals.
Ah, yes. The goals versus systems debate. I've heard a lot about this, but I'm still a little fuzzy on the distinction.
Well, think of it this way. Goals are about the results you want to achieve, while systems are about the processes that get you there.
Okay.
So, for example, your goal might be to write a book, but your system is the daily writing habit. You establish the outlining process, you use the feedback you seek from others, all the things that contribute to making that goal a reality.
So it's like you're focusing on the journey, not just the destination.
Exactly.
I can see how that would be more sustainable in the long run.
It is because goals can be motivating, but they can also create a lot of pressure.
Right.
If we're constantly fixated on the end result, we might get discouraged if we hit roadblocks or we don't see immediate progress.
Totally.
But with the solid system in place, we can trust the process and focus on just showing up consistently, even when motivation wanes.
That's a really important point because it takes the pressure off having to be perfect all the time.
It does, and it allows us to enjoy the process of growth and learning, which is ultimately what makes any journey worthwhile.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of systems, but how do we actually go about building effective systems for habit change?
Well, the chapter offers a lot of practical advice on this, and one of the key strategies that it emphasizes is habit stacking.
Ah, yes, we touched on this briefly earlier. Can you remind us how it works?
Yeah, of course, habit stacking is all about leveraging the power of existing habits to create new ones. So instead of trying to introduce a brand new habit into your routine cold turkey, you stack it on top of an existing habit that's already automatic for you.
So you're piggybacking on an established behavior pattern.
Exactly. So, for example, let's say you want to start meditating every morning, but you struggle to make time for it. You could stack it on top of an existing habit, like brushing your teeth. So every morning after you brush your teeth, you meditate for 5 minutes.
So the brushing becomes the cue for the meditation,
Exactly.
and it makes it feel like a natural extension of your existing routine.
Precisely. And the key is to make that connection really clear and consistent.
Okay.
So after current habit, I will new habit.
I like that.
Yeah.
Because it takes the decision-making out of it. You're not constantly trying to figure out when and how to fit this new habit into your day.
Exactly.
It's already predetermined.
Exactly. And you can use this for all sorts of habits, big or small. It's a really effective way to build that consistency without having to rely solely on willpower.
It's so practical and actionable. This is making me rethink my entire morning routine.
It's amazing how these small tweaks to our routine can really have a ripple effect on our behavior.
It really is.
Uh,
But I have to admit, even with all these strategies, sometimes I still struggle to stay motivated. I set these ambitious goals, and then life gets in the way and I just lose steam.
That's completely normal motivation and naturally ebbs and flows. And that's why it's so important to build those systems that support us, even when we're not feeling particularly inspired.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Yeah.
How do we create systems that are resilient to our fluctuating motivation levels?
One strategy the chapter recommends is temptation bundling. which we talked about earlier. It's a brilliant way to harness the power of immediate gratification to make those less desirable habits more appealing.
Right. I love that example of only allowing yourself to watch your favorite show while you're cooking dinner, like tricking yourself into doing the things you need to do.
Exactly. And there's another powerful tool the chapter introduces called implementation intentions.
Okay. I'm not familiar with that term. What are implementation intentions?
It's basically pre-commitments to action. So instead of just vaguely saying, I'm going to exercise more, you create a very specific plan for when and where you'll do it.
So, for example, instead of saying I'm going to work out this week, I'd say I'm going for a run at 7 a.m. on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday in the park.
Exactly. You're removing the decision making in the moment you've already made the commitment.
Right.
So there's no need to debate with yourself when the time comes.
That's so smart. I can see how that would make it much harder to talk yourself out of it.
It does. And the research shows that implementation intentions are incredibly effective at increasing follow through.
Okay.
It's like setting yourself up on autopilot for success.
This is blowing my mind. It's like we're hacking our own brains to make those good habits automatic.
In a way, we are, and that's the power of understanding the science behind habit formation.
Yeah.
It gives us the tools to really shape our behavior in ways that support our goals and our overall well-being.
But let's be real. Even with the best systems in place, there are going to be times when we slip up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're human after all.
Absolutely. And that's where the concept of self-compassion comes in which the chapter emphasizes it's about being kind to ourselves when we stumble, recognizing that setbacks are a normal part of the process.
So it's about reframing our relationship with failure.
Yeah.
Instead of seeing it as a sign of weakness, we see it as an opportunity to learn and adjust course.
Exactly. And this is so important because shame and self-criticism are incredibly demotivating.
Right.
They create this negative feedback loop that makes it even harder to get back on track.
So how do we cultivate more self-compassion in this context of habit change?
Well, it starts with acknowledging that everyone makes mistakes.
Yeah.
It's part of being human.
Right.
And then it's about treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer a friend who is struggling.
That's such an important reminder. We often hold ourselves to these impossibly high standards and then beat ourselves up when we inevitably fall short.
It's a recipe for burnout and discouragement.
Totally.
Self-compassion, on the other hand, allows us to approach the process of change with more grace and resilience.
This is all so insightful. It's making me realize that habit change is not just about willpower and discipline. It's about understanding ourselves, being kind to ourselves, and creating systems that support us even when we're not at our best.
Exactly. It's about building a sustainable lifestyle that reflects our values and aspirations.
Well, I, for one, am feeling incredibly motivated to put all of this into practice.
Me too. It's exciting to think about the positive changes we can create in our lives, one small habit at a time.
Speaking of small changes, the chapter also talks about this idea of habit shaping, which I think is really helpful for tackling those big, daunting goals that can feel so overwhelming.
Ah, yes, habit shaping.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant approach for making those seemingly insurmountable goals more manageable. And it's all about breaking down a large, complex goal into smaller, more achievable steps.
Okay.
It's about creating a gradual progression that allows you to build momentum and avoid feeling overwhelmed.
So it's like taking baby steps toward the desired outcome.
Precisely. Instead of trying to change everything at once, you focus on making small incremental adjustments that gradually move you in the right direction.
Okay, can you give an example of how this might work in practice?
Absolutely. Let's say you want to start exercising regularly, but you haven't been active in years.
Right.
Instead of trying to jump into an intense workout routine right away, which can be discouraging and unsustainable, you could start by simply committing to a 5-minute walk each day.
So you're starting with a very achievable goal. That sets you up for success. It's about building that foundation of consistency before ramping up the intensity.
Exactly. Once that 5-minute walk becomes a consistent habit, you can gradually increase the duration or intensity. Maybe you walk for 10 minutes, then 15, then 20, or maybe you start incorporating some light jogging intervals. The key is to progress at a pace that feels challenging but not overwhelming.
So you're creating this positive feedback loop where each small win kind of reinforces your motivation and makes the next step feel more attainable.
Precisely. It's about building confidence and competence gradually. And this ties back to the importance of celebrating those small wins, which the chapter also emphasizes.
Right.
It's easy to get caught up in the pursuit of those big goals,
Yeah.
but it's those small, consistent victories that keep us motivated and moving forward.
That's a great reminder. It's not about trying to make these huge efforts all at once.
Right.
It's about showing up consistently and making those small deposits into your future self.
Exactly. It's about trusting the process and embracing the power of small, consistent actions.
This whole conversation has been so empowering. It's making me realize that I have so much more control over my habits and ultimately my life than I previously thought.
That's the beauty of understanding the science behind habit formation. It demystifies the process and it gives us the tools to create positive change.
It really does. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from the four laws of behavior change to the importance of systems, identity-based habits, habit stacking, and so much more. I feel like I have this whole new toolbox for tackling those pesky bad habits and building the life I want.
Me too. It's been a fascinating exploration.
But before we wrap up, there's one more concept from the chapter that I wanted to touch on, the idea of habit tracking.
Yes, habit
What
tracking.
seems like a really simple yet powerful strategy.
It is. It's all about creating awareness and accountability. It's essentially about monitoring your progress and visually representing your consistency.
Okay.
So this could involve using a simple calendar, a habit tracker app, or even just a journal. The key is to have a tangible record of your efforts.
So you're like keeping score of your own behavior. You're making those invisible actions visible so you can actually see your progress over time.
Exactly. And research shows that the simple act of tracking a behavior can increase the likelihood that you'll stick with it.
Interesting.
It's like you're making a silent contract with yourself every time you mark that habit as complete.
That's fascinating. So what are some of the key benefits of habit tracking?
Well, first and foremost, it increases awareness.
Okay.
By actively tracking your habits, you become more conscious of your actions and your patterns. You start to notice those triggers that lead to unwanted behaviors and those moments when you're most likely to succeed.
So you're shining a light on those unconscious patterns that are driving your behavior.
Exactly. And second, it provides a sense of accomplishment.
Okay.
Seeing a string of successful days can be incredibly motivating.
Yeah.
It's like you're building a visual chain of success that you don't want to break.
It's that visual reminder of your progress, which can be really helpful during those times when motivation dips.
Absolutely. And third, it helps you identify areas for improvement if you're consistently failing to stick to a certain habit tracking. It can help you pinpoint the obstacles that are getting in the way.
Right.
Maybe you're trying to exercise after work, but you're always too tired.
Yeah.
Tracking that habit might reveal that you need to adjust your schedule or find a different time of day to work out.
So it's a tool for self-reflection as well.
Precisely, habit tracking allows you to spot those patterns and trends in your behavior, helping you understand what works and what needs tweaking. It's like having a data-driven approach to personal growth.
I can see how that would be incredibly valuable. It takes the guesswork out of habit change.
It does, and even the simple act of marking a habit complete can be a really powerful reinforcer.
It's like giving yourself that little pat on the back for staying on track.
Precisely those small wins, those
Yeah.
consistent check marks, they can build momentum and keep you moving forward.
It's a great reminder that even the smallest actions can have a really significant impact on our overall progress.
Absolutely. It's all about consistency and building those positive reinforcement loops.
Yeah, commitment devices are basically ways to kind of lock yourself into a certain course of action,
Okay.
making it harder to back out or give in to temptation later on.
So you're removing that option to choose the easy way out.
Exactly. It's about anticipating your future self's weakness and setting up these safeguards in advance.
Oh, that's smart. Okay, so give me an example of a commitment device in action.
Okay, so let's say you're trying to save money for a down payment on a house. You could set up an automatic transfer from your checking account to your savings account each month. That way the money is out of sight, out of mind, and you're less likely to spend it impulsively.
Oh, so you're making it harder to actually access that money you're trying to save.
Exactly. Or let's say you're trying to cut back on eating out. You could give your credit card to a friend for a week and only ask for it back when you have a legitimate reason to use it, like buying groceries.
Oh, that's a great idea. It adds that extra layer of accountability. Yeah, it does. And the beauty of commitment devices is that they can be tailored to fit any habit or goal. It's all about being creative and finding ways to make those undesirable behaviors less appealing and those desired behaviors more automatic.
This has been such an insightful deep dive into the art of making bad habits unsatisfying. With a little creativity and strategic planning, we can make those undesirable behaviors far less appealing and ultimately break free from their grip.
Yeah, definitely.
It's been a pleasure exploring these concepts with you.
Likewise.
Well, that wraps up another fascinating deep dive. We've explored the world of habit formation, diving deep into the psychology of behavior change, and uncovering so many practical strategies and insights.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground.
The four laws of behavior change, the power of habit stacking, temptation, bundling identity-based habits, and the importance of making those good habits enjoyable and those bad habits less appealing.
Exactly.
The power of systems, the role of self-compassion, the magic of habit shaping the compounding effect of small, consistent actions, and so much more.
It's been a truly enriching exploration, and I hope our listeners feel as inspired and empowered as we do to start putting these principles into practice.
Absolutely. And we encourage you to revisit those key concepts from the chapter experiment
Mm.
with the strategies that we've discussed. And remember, change is a journey, not a destination. So be patient with yourself, celebrate those small wins, and never underestimate the transformative power of small, consistent actions.
Until next time, happy habit building.